It happened on my first day at work in downtown Miami. The glass lobby was full of laughter, designer suits, and confidence that smelled expensive. I was just trying to find the elevator when it happened. An intern named Michael walked straight toward me, holding a cup of Coke. Then, with a smirk that froze my breath, he threw it right in my face. The soda splashed down my neck, sticky and cold. The laughter that followed. I'll never forget that sound. The Coke ran down my blouse, soaking the thin white fabric until it clung to my skin. My hair, tied back neatly that morning, was now dripping and heavy. I could feel everyone staring, some whispering, others laughing loud enough to echo off the glass walls. My cheeks burned, not from shame, but from restraint. I wanted to scream, to throw something back, but instead, I stood still. My mother once told me, when the world laughs, let silence be your armor. So I did. Michael smirked, spinning the empty cup in his hand like a trophy. Oops, he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. Thought you were janitorial. The laughter roared again, cruel and sharp. I looked at him, not with anger, but with the calmness of someone who's already decided how the story will end. He didn't know that the company's founder, my husband, was the one who'd sent me there under another name. He wanted me to see who the people really were before taking my rightful place. I turned slowly and walked away, my shoes sticking to the marble floor with every step. Behind me, I heard whispers, she should just quit. What a mess. But I kept walking. I found a restroom, locked myself inside, and looked into the mirror. My reflection was a stranger, wet hair, ruined blouse, eyes bright with fire I hadn't seen in years. Not yet, I whispered. Let them laugh. I grabbed a few paper towels, dabbed my face, and smiled faintly. That was the moment I decided, I wouldn't just survive that day, I'd own it. By noon, I'd learned 3 things. People in that office judged by labels, power smelled like cologne, and silence scared them more than anger ever could. I kept my trainee badge clipped to my pocket, even when it felt like a weight pulling me down. As I walked through the halls, every step echoed, reminding me I was being watched. At the mixer that afternoon, Michael was holding court again, surrounded by co-workers eager to orbit his arrogance. He caught my eye and smirked, as if daring me to react. I didn't. Instead, I poured myself a glass of water, lifted it slowly, and met his gaze. For the first time, he looked away. That tiny flicker of discomfort was enough to keep me standing tall. Then she appeared, Margaret, a senior advisor with silver hair and eyes that missed nothing. She approached me quietly, ignoring the crowd, and handed me a folder sealed with a red confidential stamp. From the chairman, she whispered. I nodded, keeping my expression neutral, but inside, my pulse quickened. The document was a restructuring plan, one that could change everything. Someone nearby noticed, whispering, "Why would a trainee get that?" Their voices carried, but I pretended not to hear. When I left the mixer, the Miami sky was turning gold outside the glass walls. My blouse still smelled faintly of Coke, my pride still tasted bitter, but something inside me had shifted. They saw a nobody. I saw an empire waiting to be corrected. As I stepped into the elevator, I caught my reflection again, still calm, still steady. But behind my eyes was a storm. I knew that one day soon, the same people laughing now would bow their heads in silence. And I'd be there to watch it happen. The next morning, I arrived early, before the city had shaken off its sleep. The Miami skyline shimmered against the rising sun, and the air inside Murata's glass tower felt colder than usual. I walked through the lobby where yesterday's humiliation had played out like a cruel comedy. The faint smell of cola still lingered in the marble floor. I wondered if anyone else noticed, or if they'd already erased it from memory. But I hadn't. I carried it with me, not as shame but as fuel. In the break room, a group of marketing associates were gathered, loud and confident. One of them, a man with slicked back hair and too much cologne, looked me up and down. "You know we have a dress code, right?" he said, smirking. "You're giving thrift store realness." His friends burst out laughing, one snapping a photo like it was entertainment. My hand paused halfway to the coffee machine. For a heartbeat, silence filled the air. Then I turned, faced him fully, and said softly, "Is that all you've got?" My voice wasn't raised, but the calm in it sliced through the laughter. The room went still. He didn't answer. He didn't have to. I'd already taken back control. As I left, I passed the HR corridor. A memo pinned to the board caught my eye, a list of new hires, with my name scribbled at the bottom like an afterthought. A junior HR rep noticed me reading it and smirked. "That list's for real employees," he said loud enough for the cubicles to hear. Laughter bubbled around us. I smiled faintly, tore the memo down, folded it neatly, and slipped it into my bag. "I'll keep this," I said quietly. His grin faltered. He didn't know I'd already signed off on next quarter's staffing cuts. By lunchtime, the whispers about me had grown. "She's weirdly calm," someone said near the water cooler. "Creepy calm." They weren't wrong. Calmness was my weapon. Every cruel word, every condescending look, it all built the quiet fire inside me. I wasn't waiting for revenge. I was watching, learning, cataloging every name, every smirk. And when the time came, I'd know exactly who had earned their downfall. That evening, the company's networking mixer was in full swing. The lobby glittered with champagne glasses and fake laughter. Michael was there, his ego shining brighter than his watch. I stood at the edge of the crowd, holding a glass of water, blending into the background. My blouse was plain, my hair tied back, my presence invisible, and that was exactly how I wanted it. Across the room, Margaret caught my eye again. She gave the slightest nod before slipping away toward the boardroom. I knew what that meant. The CEO was preparing for the announcement. My pulse steadied. Every cruel face I'd seen in the past 48 hours was here. Vanessa in her red dress, Michael with another Coke in hand, the HR rep pretending he owned the place. None of them had a clue. Then it happened again. Michael approached, smiling that same venomous smile. "Still here," he said. "Guess you like the taste of Coke." Before I could move, he tipped his glass, spilling the soda down my blouse once more. Gasps. Laughter. Phones raised to record. I didn't flinch. I just stood there, eyes locked on his. For a second, he looked uncertain. Something about my calm unnerved him. Then a voice cut through the noise, deep, commanding. "Enough." The room froze. The CEO stepped forward, his suit immaculate, his expression grave. He turned to the crowd and said, "Everyone, please welcome the new chairwoman of Marauder Global, Mary Carter." Silence. Absolute, suffocating silence. Michael's grin collapsed. Vanessa's glass slipped from her hand, shattering against the marble. My trainee badge gleamed under the lights, still pinned to my chest. I didn't speak. I didn't smile. I simply stood taller, letting the weight of their shock settle over them like a storm. For the first time, no one laughed. The same people who had mocked me now stared, pale and trembling, as if realizing too late who they'd been dealing with. I met Michael's eyes one last time, and whispered just loud enough for him to hear, "Oops." The next morning, the Miami sun rose bright and merciless, pouring through the glass walls of Marauder Global like judgment itself. The office that once buzzed with arrogance was now unnervingly quiet. People whispered instead of laughed, stared instead of sneered. My name, Mary Carter, had spread through every department like electricity, and now every move I made drew nervous eyes. I walked the same path I had on my first day, where humiliation once clung to me like the soda stains on my blouse. But this time, the air parted around me. No one dared stand in my way. Jared, no Michael, was sitting at his desk, pale and rigid. His phone buzzed non-stop, probably messages from friends outside, already seeing the headlines. CEO's wife undercover. Intern humiliated company chairwoman. I didn't have to say a word. The silence between us was punishment enough. I stopped near his cubicle. "Good morning, Michael," I said softly. The sound of his name made him flinch. He mumbled something that might have been an apology, but I didn't stay to hear it. Apologies mean nothing when they come from fear. By noon, HR had sent formal suspension notices to everyone involved in the incident. The very same HR rep who'd mocked me the day before now stood outside my office door, trembling as he handed me files for approval. I looked at him for a long moment before signing, my pen scratching the paper with calm precision. "Next time," I said gently, "choose respect before you're forced to." He nodded, eyes wide. I could almost see the realization forming, how quickly power can shift when built on cruelty. But not everything was about punishment. The janitor who'd quietly offered me a towel that first day was promoted to floor supervisor. The shy IT intern who defended me in the group chat received a full-time position. I wanted to rebuild this place from the inside out, strip away the arrogance and let dignity take root. As I left my office that evening, the reflection staring back from the glass doors wasn't the woman drenched in coke anymore. It was someone reborn in silence, sharpened by humiliation, and steadied by purpose. Days passed, and the transformation was undeniable. The halls that once echoed with laughter at someone's expense now hummed with careful politeness. When I entered a room, chairs straightened, voices lowered. But I didn't crave fear, I wanted understanding. I wanted every person in that building to realize what power truly meant, not dominance, but restraint. One afternoon, as I reviewed restructuring documents in the conference room, the senior board members entered, their eyes a mix of awe and guilt. One of them, an older man with gray temples and decades of arrogance behind him, cleared his throat. "Mrs. Carter," he began, we owe you an apology. We didn't recognize," I stopped him gently. "You recognized exactly what you wanted to see," I said. "Now, let's build a company that doesn't make that mistake again." My tone was soft, but my words landed like thunder. Outside, whispers of the story had reached the media. The headline read, "The woman drenched in coke owns the company." Social feeds exploded with opinions, praise, and speculation. But I didn't read them. I didn't need the world to know my worth. I'd already proven it, to myself. Later that day, I returned to the same cafeteria where I'd once sat alone. The same table, the same window view of Miami's skyline glowing against the afternoon sun. This time when I sat down, others hesitated before joining me, then they did. Quietly, respectfully. One of them, a young woman from accounting, whispered, "We're glad you stayed." I smiled faintly. "So am I," I replied. The coke, the laughter, the humiliation, they had become more than memories. They were the foundation of my quiet revolution. I didn't need revenge, I needed change. And as I looked around at the people slowly learning the meaning of humility, I knew this was just the beginning. The real transformation wasn't mine, it was theirs. It was my last day in Miami before returning to the European headquarters. The city stretched beneath me, a living mosaic of lights and motion, reflected in the glass of Murata Global's rooftop terrace. The wind carried the faint hum of traffic, the pulse of a city that never quite slept. I stood there alone, breathing in the salt of the ocean mixed with the scent of possibility. The same building that once echoed with laughter at my expense now held its breath whenever I walked by. I didn't want fear to linger here, I wanted awareness to stay. Behind me, the door opened. It was Thomas, my husband. He didn't wear the sharp expression of a man used to power. Instead, his presence brought warmth to the steel and glass around us. He didn't speak right away, just walked up beside me and placed a hand on the railing. For a long moment, we watched the skyline together, silent. "You did it," he finally said. "You didn't just expose them, you reminded them who they could be." I turned to him, smiling faintly. "It was never about proving who I am," I said. "It was about seeing who they were." He nodded, his eyes soft, pride glimmering behind them. The wind tangled my hair, and for the first time in weeks, I let it fall freely over my shoulders. The world below looked smaller now, not because I stood higher, but because I'd learned that true strength doesn't shout from the top floor. It whispers through endurance. Thomas slipped an arm around my waist. "Ready to go home?" he asked. I looked down one last time at the glass lobby where it all began. "Not yet," I said softly. "I just want to remember what silence can build." A week later, the story broke nationwide. Headlines everywhere, the trainee who owned the tower, from humiliation to leadership. But behind the noise, in quiet offices and crowded break rooms, something more important had shifted. People spoke differently to one another. The interns no longer mocked the custodians. Managers began to listen instead of command. Small things, maybe, but real ones. Michael's internship was terminated. Vanessa's resignation was accepted before she could offer it. The HR rep who once laughed at my name now led diversity training sessions, his tone humbled, his steps careful. But I didn't celebrate their downfall. I celebrated the few who had shown kindness when it was hardest, the janitor promoted to supervisor, the intern who became my deputy, the receptionist who now smiled with sincerity. They were the future of the company. As for me, I returned to Europe not as a conqueror, but as a witness. The coke that once soaked through my blouse had long dried, but the lesson it carried never would. Dignity isn't loud. It doesn't announce itself in titles or money or polished shoes. It stands in the storm, quiet and unbroken, until the world finally learns to listen. Sometimes when I think of that first day, the laughter, the cold sting, the humiliation, I smile. Because that was the day I remembered who I was. Not the chairwoman. Not the wife of a founder. Just Mary Carter, a woman who stood still long enough for the world to see her strength. And in that silence, everything changed. This is a story of triumph. Did the protagonist make the right decisions? If you were in this situation, what would you do? Share your opinion in the comments. We want to know what you think. Don't forget to like and subscribe to Memorable Stories and Overcoming, where inspiring stories of triumph and justice are shared daily.